Well, welcome everybody. My name is again Rusty Mullock. Thank you, James. Open Athens has really been the backbone of our library's digital access for a really long time. By thinking creatively and adapting this technology, we can extend its reach and apply it to a wide range of non-traditional applications. I know a lot of you probably use it maybe for traditional library things, the EBSCOs, the ProQuest, Clairvoyance, anything else like that. But really, this has helped us streamline a lot of and increase access to a lot of the different tools that we've used for that we offered from the library. So a long time ago, before we had Open Athens, we shared a lot of our, and we did not use Easy Proxy. We were a very small institution. We have 2,000 students. IT is very centralized. They didn't really work with the library very often. It took a lot of convincing for people to do stuff. So when we did our information literacy sessions, we would send out and do a lot of username and passwords, which was not very secure and not a great way to do it. But that's what we did nonetheless. One day after being locked out of EBSCO admin, probably for the umpteenth time that day, we learned that a lot of our login credentials were being shared on a Russian test bank site. So we had a meeting with different EBSCO folks, and they offered Open Athens as a solution to solve this problem. And it was great because it really helped us centralize our access to our control so that there was better seamless access to many of our tools that we offer. At our college, there is only one librarian with a lot of student workers who help make sure that everything gets done. So there's really only one single point of contact for staff, faculty, and students when there is an issue for authentication. And they usually reach out to me, or they also reach out to our IT people who then forward that email along to me. And then I reach out to EBSCO or Open Athens to solve the problem. We don't have very many issues generally with our authentication with authentication unless the credentials have been updated or something like that. But when EBSCO or Open Athens does respond, it's usually very quick. We're pleased always with the personalized assistance, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and the optimization and continuous improvements, and especially with the reporting and data analytics. For us, outsourcing tech support to EBSCO for authentication of the library and non-library resources, because I know talking about non-library resources, we'll talk about in a minute, but even our library resources really has saved us a lot of time to help us build relationships with our different constituents, stakeholders in the college, including alumni, staff, faculty, and our students. Before, when we had our username and password authentication system, that we spent a lot of time helping people get into the system. Even now today, when we have many of our emerging technology tools, especially our AI tools like lit maps or using Gamma for image generation, generative AI image generation, we spend a lot of time getting people in the username and passwords, setting up usernames and passwords, and having one username and password with college credentials does save a lot of time for us for teaching and learning, which is wonderful. We have become, and we have
Sorry, Rusty. I think the slides have zoomed in and we're not quite seeing them properly
do we see
on
them
the
better now?
show. There we go. Yeah, now we can see it. Yeah, the
Perfect.
one slide. Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yep. Um, and we're in the wrong. See, that's odd. All right, I'm gonna back. Sorry for people, everybody. This is now we're in the right place. And so we've become known at the college, the library has become known as our authentication hub rather than just our technology hub. We're definitely well known for our technology and providing different tools like Hypothesis and others. I'm not going to go down the list, but generally anything that's picked up by faculty, the Center of Faculty Development generally sends it over to the library, and we provide user support for that. So it's really been Open Athens has been wonderful to allow us to create seamless access for a variety of different tools, and we'll get into that in a moment. So this is just a long but short list of many of the tools that we use, and I'm going to go into each one of these boxes. So City is how people generally get the IRB approval. And so that's been great. It's really been helpful especially when we have different people who say they've gone through an IRB and we look into OpenAthens and like, well, you've never actually authenticated. So those kind of stats do help us, and it also helps people seamlessly access into that tool. We have Wall Street Journal app, kind of the same one that generally most people get. We moved away from ProQuest newspapers aggregated system and went directly to Wall Street Journal because people wanted that seamless experience. Integrating that was seamless and easy, and just so much easier than anything that we could ever do. Wall Street, Dow Jones, and EBSCO talked to each other for a couple minutes, and all of a sudden everything was working perfectly. Grammarly has been kind of one of our great test cases, because at first it was just basically IP authenticated. We used proxy, but that still raised some issues with off-campus access. But once we integrated that into OpenAthens, life became easier for the students, and we noticed a huge uptick in registrations once that happened. We actually go through a consortium policy, and we use Easy Borrow for interlibrary loan. And that was the tenant for that was actually kind of fun to do, because that was probably the only one I've ever done totally by myself. But when I did have questions, EBSCO was there for me to answer anything I did have, and I worked with the team at Index Data, I believe it was, and we set that up. And so it's been really that we did that over the summer, and it was just the whole implementation process was pretty simple. Prezi is one of our edtech tools, and it's a presentation software. And again, Prezi just worked with EBSCO, and they contacted each other for a couple of times, and that was seamless. We never actually had any authentication issues raised to us. So that was one of those ones that we just keep to the side and just don't worry about. Unidiscover was, and we'll talk about Unidiscover as one of the ones that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Unidiscover it was a AI discovery tool before the AI craze. It used knowledge map graphs to find research gaps in, and is like lit maps. But they were wonderful because they worked with JISC, joined the federation, and I'll get into that in a second. Bywater Solutions, we require authentication into our book catalog, so we have Koha, but Bywater worked with us and EBSCO to make sure that we had authentication through that, and probably one of the few libraries that require authentication into our library catalog. But we found that when we had it open to the public, we were having other issues that don't need to be talked about. But this has allowed us to kind of track and have better understanding of who's using our catalog and who's not using our catalog. New York Times, which we'll talk about in a minute, still going on with authentication issues, but we only started with them kind of like Dow Jones, using the app back in probably September, maybe August. And they're brand new to the whole federation. And so we're still working out issues, but it's been wonderful talking to them and figuring that everyone's always willing to figure out things. So we'll get that in a second. Panopto is a video storage unit and video ed tech tool. And again, we'll talk about them in a second. But one of the two that I liked recently is that one of the things that we always have problems with are local newspapers. So the one next to the right on Panopto is called Beta Bay News, and the other one's Cape Gazette. And our college is in an area called the Delmarva Peninsula, and these two resources provide news about this area and a lot about the college. So our director of alumni and our development officer asked for access to these, but those people work remotely, and so these two places only allow username and password access, and it's one username and password. So again, going back to that Russian cheating website, we still have bad memories about that. And so we wanted to make sure that there's seamless access off campus, and EBSCO worked with them to create a proxy access for them so that we could, the director of alumni and the development officer could access the resources that they needed, these two resources that they use quite often from home while they worked remotely. And Cadence is a really cool tool, and that was actually made is a way to text students. And so the Cadence worked with to create proxy access with EBSCO. For today's talk, we're going to be talking about UNU Discover, Zoom, Grammarly, New York Times, Beta Bay News, Cape Gazette, and Panopto, are kind of our main non-library ones. The ones that we've actually had issues with over the last probably 3 to 4 years, but these are really small issues. They're not issues that we generally have to worry about, but they have good stories nonetheless. So we moved to OpenAthens as a campus-wide authentication platform, probably in 2014 or 15, and it's been wonderful. Centralized data collection, one authentication system for all, and enhanced security. We don't find any of our passwords anymore being shared on a Russian test bank site. The library's role in managing OpenAthens has been fairly easy and has allowed us, especially for Grammarly, for provision and managing access to different user accounts, because we only have about 1,000 accounts in Grammarly, and because we're a small college, and so it allows us, as people graduate or faculty and staff leave the college, to provision access much easier than if we were using it in just through either a proxy or username and password or IP authentication. The usage of analytics has been wonderful. It's always great to see how, whenever a new contract is coming up, who's using it, who's not using it, what groups are using it. It really does help with, but how it helps us most is through marketing. So it tells us who's not using tools that are using these tools, and then we can start marketing to say we notice psychology students aren't using the APA's sources or resources, and so we start marketing to the psychology students and like, did you know that we have these psychology resources? Or criminal justice is not using this criminal justice database through EBSCO. We start marketing to them. So it helps a lot with our targeted marketing to targeted audiences. And the technical support is just wonderful. I can't speak enough to that. The fact that I don't need to spend a lot of my day working on, I can outsource this one particular thing. And the librarians generally have kind of a mixed bag about outsourcing, but this is one of the few things that I can definitely say that outsourcing is absolutely worth it. It saves so much time that we don't have to spend. It's not midnight and we're working on trying to fix authentication issues, which we were doing a lot prior to having OpenAthens. So this is UNU Discover. As I said before, it's a knowledge graph. Helps with discovery of different resources, especially open access resources, but we could actually upload a lot of our resources into this tool. They currently actually don't exist, but what was wonderful about this emerging technology tool is that they were willing to join the federation so that they could do OpenAthens. And before it was username and password, and once they joined OpenAthens, we saw a huge uptick of users and registrations of the tool. And so it really made things a lot easier for us. And so that was UNU Discover, and it was really, I think we spent at max, I don't know, maybe 15 hours total to get it all set up. And it was just kind of really more convincing UNU Discover to join. And once they joined, the Open Athens and EBSCO took off from there. So next we're going to talk about, and this is kind of my favorite story, is like whenever anyone says, well, why is the library in charge of authentication, which surprisingly happens more often than you think, is our Zoom instance. And so I don't know how long ago this was, but sometime right after the pandemic, we had an annual research symposium for the faculty, and we held it hybrid for this first time. We were using Zoom TV, and all of a sudden, Zoom went just black screen. And it turned out that there's something, a credential wasn't updated. I reached out to someone at EBSCO while I was working from home at 9 a.m. or no, at 10 a.m. And by 10:45, while people were waiting, EBSCO and OA worked collaboratively to identify and resolve the technical problem. Connectivity was restored by 10:30, and the event by 10:45, the event continued on like nothing ever happened. I think I got more emails that day than I've ever received in that short a period of time telling me that Zoom is down, because at that point it was right during the pandemic and we were doing a lot more online classes because of mandatory things for COVID. And so, but it was amazing when you you give a little bit of background of what's going on, how EBSCO and OpenAthens will work together to resolve the problem as quickly as possible. So that's one of my favorite stories with using OpenAthens. Grammarly is one of the EdTech tools that we've been using a lot with OpenAthens, and recently there was a credential update, and there is a problem when someone was teaching a class and they're teaching using Grammarly to help the students with writing, and I got an email saying, "Oh, this is down." But they, I put in a ticket in EBSCO Connect, and then I forwarded it off to my salesperson, and all of a sudden, within probably 12 hours, we were able to resolve the issue. It was more of an issue on our side than anything else, but they walked us through the different steps that we needed to do. And it's great because Grammarly has a lot of interesting statistics, but they don't really have how often people go in it. And so it's really this kind of supplementing that data when we share reports to the provost. It's helped us a lot with why we're keeping this tool, and when we start adding more users to our license, it kind of this tells a good story. So adding different data points for advocating for library resources or ed tech tools really helps with using that OpenAthens and how often that people are using. And it's also really neat sometimes to see Grammarly getting used. We don't teach during the summer generally, and so it's really cool to see the spikes during summer months that show us that Grammarly is being used all the time, even for lots of different things that we normally wouldn't think of, like email and other things. So it's really cool. It's just one of those. It's Open Athens is always just in the background for us until something breaks. But when it does, again, repeat the story. When it does break, it gets resolved fairly quickly without much issue on our side. So we're still dealing with this. I don't know when hopefully it'll get resolved. I think we just got an email from EBSCO Connect yesterday. So we have had a lot of issues with New York Times authentication, but it was actually kind of fun. I sat through a very technical call that they made spoken very plain language about all the different things that's going on either side, on our side, and what we need to do for SAML. And for authentication on what we need to do. And then New York Times sat through this call, and I think it was like a 2-hour thing, but at the end of it, we were able to resolve it. And I just don't know very many other companies that have actually are willing to sit down with a publisher or a vendor and actually just chat with them about what's going on and trying to get it resolved in an expedient manner. And it's also been great for the ticketing support. The ticketing support's been really helpful for us because it allows us to keep track of what's going on and where we are in the different ticket. And they're very responsive when we do ask for updates and stuff. So I think that Beta Bay News and Cape Gazette which we use proxy integration through IP addresses, has actually increased our usage a lot. So because of Open Athens, we now definitely are using we're using these resources that really only, especially because a lot of people are working remotely now, would probably only really use when they're off campus, are getting used much more often than they would ever do before. And so that has been great. It's the seamless integration. And I know that some of the people who do use and use these two resources, Cape Gazette and Beta Bay News, they would be, they're very vocal, and so they would definitely let me know if things were not working. And so not having hearing having any emails from them has been wonderful, because I know that they're accessing that from home and seeing that spike and being able to work and read that news over the weekend without having to ask for the username and password. It's just been kind of a relief. It allows us, again, to build relationships and do other things, and it's kind of, it makes it a library a trusted place to go. So Panopto is actually an edtech tool run by the Center of Faculty Development, and it was once run by the library but as it moved over to a different home, it's been great because the associate director of Center for Faculty Development has come out, and there was an issue, and because we were in a meeting at the academic affairs team, they pointed this out, and so they pointed out there's an issue, and at the same time the credentials are being updated, and so we were able to fix that fairly easily. But for Panopto, more than anything else, because as we're moving away from COVID, it's the justifying the renewal cost has been really helpful. So like sometimes things aren't, the story is not perfectly told in the data that edtech tools share. And so seeing that people are using it, what types of people are using it through provisioning of, like, saying that they're staff, saying that they're students, and how they're using and how much time is spent in those tools has really been awesome for Panopto. So that's actually allowed us to keep that tool up, that probably might have been hit the chopping block much earlier if it wasn't for the data that was provided by OpenAthens. So we use ClickUp a lot for much of our project management. Probably as many people here use some sort of tool or not use a tool, but we do keep track of these things for different purposes, and we've noticed that 95% reduction in IT support tickets, and that's Goldie Beacon's IT support tickets. We used to be one of the biggest offenders in their minds of IT support tickets, and so we don't have to ever put support tickets into IT anymore. It probably is closer to 100%, but I think every once in a while we have something, put something in for, I think there was a printer jam the other day over the weekend, and so that's probably accounts for the 5% of the IT support that we get now. Really, we haven't had any worry about risk of data breaches, but I think that our data breaches, and this number does not represent OpenAthens, it just with our stuff, is generally the issues are with when we don't have OpenAthens for an edtech tool. So when we have lit maps, and I think there's one other tool that we provide access for that's just username and password, and they don't provide proxy access, then they're always that worry of data breach. And there's also a worry of sharing of passwords and people, getting contacted. I was informed because I think it has something to do with a tool that we won't be named, but someone from China was trying to access my email this morning, and I've been locked out of my account about 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks. So it's nice to know that wasn't caused by anything that's being managed by OpenAthens. Our usage reporting before with username and password, we really had no usage reporting. So this has really helped with understanding the different groups, and it really, as I said before, helped us with targeted marketing, which has helped increase usage, because we like to think of the library as outside of the four walls. So, and then lastly, not least, this really does help with our improved in decision making, and it's really that 90% comes down to it's allowed us to keep tools that we otherwise probably wouldn't keep based off of usage data, but seeing that different groups, integral groups on campus are using different resources that are being provisioned and used by authenticated through OpenAthens has made our workload a lot easier when it comes down to budget season. Maintenance service is wonderful. So recently said before, the certificate update for SAML resources, that all the updates that we received via email allowed us to know that was happening, but I think there's over, I know we only have a certain number, we don't have that many tools, probably as many R1s and R2s have, or over in England and anywhere else. But we do have a lot of links that we had to check, and one of the ones that actually broke recently during the certificate was at academic source complete. So it was kind of funny. In January, we noticed a increase from our normal about usage that we were noticing in Open Athens, about 1,000 users into our EBSCO discovery service, and I noticed that we were up to that month like 7,000, and so there's a huge spike. And because of Open Athens, we were able to see that, and then we contacted EBSCO Connect, and they were able to resolve that issue quite quickly because they noticed that the link that we had didn't update after the certificate update. So that was really cool. So they're able to use EBSCO Connect and support to refresh that metadata has really been helpful. And anytime we do have a question, there's always that further assistance that we can go to. And if we're not getting the support that as fast as we can, we know we can reach out to somebody and it gets elevated so that we make sure that we always have continuous access to our resources. So overcoming challenges for us and implementing it at your institution, really there at first there was some resistance, but once we promised we'd do a 1-year trial, and that back in like 2014-15, and the fact that we reduced our number of support tickets to our institution's IT service was enough for them to realize that that was definitely a worthwhile thing to have. And so we really do most of the authentication now through all tools, and people do come to us. But there is always a lack of awareness. And so there is, just because we don't do any support tickets to our IT, there are support tickets that do go to when someone can't access something. Generally, they think IT first before they think of the library. So that sometimes can become an issue. It gets a little bit frustrating on one side or the other. And lastly, and not least, the training for faculty and staff, just to make sure that they know that they have to, for any resource that they are adopting, that it's using the college credentials. And really, like building on the challenges we discussed in the previous slides, libraries are uniquely positioned to serve as a central authentication hub for the institution. As information experts, librarians understand the complexities of managing authentication systems and can work collaboratively with EBSCO and Open Athens and other departments, and even in your own college IT departments and other departments, implement effective authentication solutions and positioning the library. And so that really has solved a lot of things for us. And now I'll open up the questions and answers. Questions, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions you have.
Yeah, great, Rusty. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, like I say, those outside the standard sort of resources being used for Open Athens there. And we've got a couple of questions that have come in, and I think one that's standing out there is you mentioned IT being involved at the start about implementing Open Athens, but when you're looking to use these other services through Open Athens, do you get your IT involved then, or do they try and say we would prefer that to be on our institutional SSO? I mean, how do those conversations go?
I think the IT, well, I have an email in front of me that I saw at least not too long ago today, and I think he copy and pastes this answer to anyone that contacts him about authentication and said, "This is a library resource. Contact Rusty."
Okay.
So
Straightforward there.
they much prefer that all authentication goes through Open Athens, and they know Open Athens. They're like, this is an Open Athens thing. This is not an IT thing, and so it's standardized language that they share with anyone who shares authentication issues.
Great. Yeah, I mean, because obviously you get the benefits there of the stats and things like that, which if they were going through the IT system might be different. So yeah, no, that's really nice to hear.
I mean, especially with and IT is not very good with sharing data sometimes, and so for all the institutions I've ever worked for, and it's always things data can get siloed. So it's nice to be able to just go and get into Open Athens and look at that dashboard whenever you need to.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. It's got a question here from Virginia. Do you have an institutional subscription to New York Times, or are you able to use Open Athens for managing the New York Times academic passes?
We have institutional subscription, and all logins are through Open Athens. and there's no passes. That was one of the part of the contract that we signed with New York Times, that it would have to be through OpenAthens to authenticate, and so that's been great. Same with Wall Street Journal.
And Field has asked, can you explain further the role of EBSCO?
So I think our subscription was through EBSCO. So EBSCO is where we go to get most of our things. But what's great is sometimes I actually forget this because we have relationships with OpenAthens, folks from OpenAthens. And so sometimes I just contact OpenAthens support by accident. And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll help you. And so it doesn't really matter if it was EBSCO or OpenAthens. There's they always want to make sure that everything is working. So I think in the past we used EBSCO directly, and now we work through PALC, which is our consortium that we use that is based out of Pennsylvania, and they manage the contract for us through EBSCO, I believe. So that's nice.
Yeah, no, perfect, Rusty. Yeah, just to expand on that, so EBSCO are a reseller partner of ours in the States, and yeah, they provide that first level of support and beyond in a lot of cases. I think some of our support might find us a bit cheeky that Rusty's coming also to us directly, but those channels are open, and at the end of the day, we just want to make sure, the customers getting the issue resolved. So no, thank you. And from Brian, is your institution using Shibboleth or something else as an IT services? So I think, and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, is there an institutional SSO service as well going on that OpenAthens is connected to or through?
No, Shibboleth.
Shibboleth.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's they use it through Microsoft Azure, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask an audience a question?
Yes, please. Yes, go for Rusty.
Is there anyone who's out there? Are there any non-traditional library resources that you all use that you found to be that OpenAthens is able to support for you?
And then a question from Brian here. Maybe I'll answer. Are there large universities where IT uses Shibboleth or another SSO and the library uses OpenAthens? So it's quite a broad spectrum on that. In the UK here, we do have a high percentage of universities using Shibboleth due to the fact that there's the UK Access Management Federation, so it works similar to how the OpenAthens Federation works. It's very heavily dependent on the academic sector to use that, and it's got those academic resources. So we do have sometimes then customers using Shibboleth with OpenAthens. That is perfectly plausible. There's also the case that OpenAthens will replace Shibboleth, and because IT, when they used to use Shibboleth a lot, they're now kind of using Microsoft Azure, Entra ID, Okta, and those sort of systems, and that's kind of replacing the need for Shibboleth as well. So yes, there are cases where they are used side by side and OpenAthens plugs into Shibboleth, or there's cases now where we're kind of seeing that Shibboleth being removed, particularly as Shibboleth often is an in-house solution and more institutions are moving to the cloud-based services. And so, yeah, OpenAthens can replace that perfectly.
For our institution, we try to move mostly everything to OpenAthens, and there is a couple of things like Qualtrics, which is a survey platform that still uses Shibboleth as one way to do it. But most everything else that the IT still runs, like Office.com and stuff, they use Azure just because Microsoft is particular in the way they do things.
Yeah, Fields asked, do you use HBR, and have you been able to connect with OpenAthens?
I don't use HBR, but I'm sure we could figure it out if we wanted, if I did subscribe to it. We've actually never had a problem with any of the tools once I explained to the vendor what the ease of access and seamless access to their tool, and that there'll be more registrations and users of that tool. People are pretty open to doing it. And if they find, it also helps. I mean, some of it their process is outsourced too, so they don't have to deal with a lot of the authentication issues that may arise.
And a question here from Adam: Is there a reason that you have not registered OpenAthens as your SAML IDP within the In Common Federation?
The reason why I haven't, and probably because of lack of awareness.
Okay, right. That might be something that Adam might pick up on. Yeah, the In Common Federation is, if people aren't aware, is the federation in the United States. So it's like the UK Fed, as I mentioned earlier. There's many countries have their own federations, so that's the US version. But yeah.
And I think our college is probably very unique in terms of we're not, probably just not because it's not a priority.
Can't see any more coming in. So, well, yeah, thank you again, Rusty, for your time. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
this session. And thank you, everyone, for attending. This is recorded, so you'll be able to catch up with it at another date. But for now, enjoy the rest of the sessions. Cheers. Bye.